All right. What do you say? We get a little creepy. Once more, these have been good episodes, fun stories. Hat tip to our friends at Disturbed True Horror Stories. Check out that podcast. They've got a bunch of great stuff. If you really love the creepy stuff here on the RR Show, Disturbed would be a great podcast for you. So make sure you go ahead and go and check that out. Hardworking folks over there on that episode. What am I saying? Let's just start this episode of the RR Show right now. It's going to be all about creepy encounters. Our first story comes from Fox Mulder, posted by that user. Under the subreddit, of course, r/CreepyEncounters. I viewed the property of a man who murdered his previous tenant. When I finished university, I moved back home until I found a job. As soon as I could afford to, I set up a profile on the website Spare Room. I was contacted by James, who had a room to rent on the outskirts of the town I worked in. It sounded good, but he wanted to talk on the phone before inviting me to view it. We had a chat one evening, and it turned out we had some things in common. We both enjoyed fitness, particularly swimming, and were movie buffs. By the end of the call, it had felt like chatting to an old friend, and I was looking forward to meeting him. James didn't specify his age, but I assumed he was in his 20s like me. When I went to view the property, he actually came out of the house next door to greet me. When he introduced himself as James, I was pretty shocked. He was at least 50, dressed quite conservatively, and looked like he was wearing a hairpiece. If he told me on the phone that he was in his early 20s, I wouldn't have questioned it. I went ahead with the viewing, but I'd already decided I didn't want to rent a room from him. I wanted to live with people who were more of a similar age to me. I was also put off by the house's decor, which looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. When I viewed the bedroom, it looked like it was occupied by a young person. There were several pairs of trainers and a games console. James said that the previous tenant, Mark, was moving to London for work. Coincidentally, my name is Mark, too. James invited me to sit in the living room after the house tour. I didn't want to be rude, so I did. He explained that he cared for his elderly mother, who lived next door. Then he started complimenting my style, saying I looked cool. He proceeded to put his hand on my leg, which made me very uncomfortable. When he asked if I was interested in the room, I said I had some other properties to view, but would be in touch. I then made my excuses to leave. Everything about him screamed red flag. I just wanted to get out of that house. As soon as I was back in my car, I called my mom to tell her how freaked out I was and I absolutely would not be living there. James texted me a few days later to ask if I thought any more about moving in. I lied and said I found somewhere closer to town. I did eventually find something with some other young professionals, which turned out to be great. Some months later, our town was shocked by the news that a man's body had been found in the fields on the outskirts. He was later identified as Mark. I didn't think much of that until I saw a murder suspect was his landlord, James. The same James whose house I viewed. I saw him on the news and got instant chills. He was later convicted of Mark's murder. Continuing with r/CreepyEncounters, posted by user Vanilla Ave. Very unsettling encounter with stranger at my door. This happened about 3 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time. and it still creeps me out. I, 21-year-old male at the time, had just moved into a new apartment on the first floor of a building. It was late one night and my roommate was out when somebody knocked on the door. This was not uncommon as we were in college and my roommate had friends that would come by to hang out at all hours of the day. I just figured it was one of his friends. So I get up to check the peephole. Staring right back at me though, through the peephole is an eyeball pressed against it. Again, this is also something that one of our friends might do just to be funny. I chuckled, opened the door. It surprised me to see a guy in his mid-20s that I didn't recognize. He was strange to say the least. He was super hyper and immediately launched into a door-to-door salesman type pitch. I can't remember exactly what he was even selling, but it was something about the local university, which I also attended at the time. The whole time he was talking, he kept looking past me into the apartment. He was fidgeting and even standing on his tiptoes to see inside. Still, I just thought the guy was weird and nervous and might not have been all there. I politely declined to buy anything from him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I finally had to be pretty stern in telling him that I wasn't interested. He finally accepted defeat, and as I was closing the door, he put his hand out and stopped the door from closing. He smiles at me and says, "I like Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 too." Now, me and my roommate had been staying up late into the night playing Mario Kart 64 in my bedroom for the past several days before that. But there was nothing that he could see from the apartment entrance that had anything to do with Mario Kart. I was taken aback and trying to add things up in my head and confusingly asked, "How do you know I play Mario Kart?" He then got super nervous and said, I just thought anyone with a couch like that would be into Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 because, it's like a retro game and that's like a retro couch." What? He was then like, "Okay, bye," and literally scurried away. I shut the door, locked it. I start trying to put the pieces together on how he could have known, because obviously it wasn't because of my grandma's old couch. Remember, it's a first-floor apartment that's backed up to the woods. My roommate got home shortly after, and I immediately tell him about the encounter. He was freaked out too, so we started investigating. At first, it seemed like there was no way to even see inside my bedroom. My blinds were always down. We went outside and tested it, and found that the only way to see inside would have been if you had your face right up against the window. And even then, you kinda had to crouch and just close one eye to get a glimpse inside. A couple of more creepy details. My window was over a balcony, and the Nintendo 64 console itself was stored inside of the TV stand and was not visible. You'd only be able to see it while we were actively playing, which we never did until we were a little stoned and it was like 2 a.m. So basically, this creep had been jumping the railing to our balcony, pressing his face against my window, and watching us play Mario Kart in the middle of the night. Never saw the guy again, but needless to say, I was pretty paranoid for a while after that, and I constantly checked my windows and woke up in the middle of the night, paranoid that he was standing there a couple of feet away, watching me sleep. Just a very unsettling encounter. I'm glad that nothing more ever came of it, and that I never saw him again. But I've always wondered what his motives were. Our final story in this r/CreepyEncounters episode comes from user Giaona. I woke up to a girl watching me in my sleep. My female friend came to visit me for a long weekend, and I, 22-year-old female, won't be letting her stay ever again. Backstory. We were friends for less than 3 months before we both moved to separate states and continued our friendship virtually until now. It has been a healthy friendship with open communication. We have had our disagreements, but mostly always talked it out and moved on. They mostly resolve around her believing I don't open up enough, and for me, she does things that are considerate at times, like be jealous of my long-term friends to their faces, and have an odd attitude problem at times. Only has been shown maybe 3 times. She can also be a bit obsessive and get upset when I don't text her for more than a day. She's got loads of my photos saved to her phone and remembers every little thing about me and has a list of my interests. I've seen it endearing until now. The trip. Day 1. The first day of the trip was great. She was bubbly and bought me a gift with a sweet note of appreciation. The first day of the trip was great. She was bubbly and brought me a gift with a special note of appreciation. We went clubbing and headed to bed separately for the night. This is where things got weird. Remember, we slept separately. Well, I woke up and she was in my bed, but not in my bed. She was sitting upright on the top of the blankets next to me with her feet straight out and her back against my headboard while looking forward. I was startled and said, "Oh," instinctively. She just looked at me. She never said she was waiting for me to wake up or maybe she was uncomfortable on the couch. Nothing. Then she left my room. I have no clue how long she was sitting there. Day 2 to 3. Day 2 in the morning, we walked around the city where she was engaged and wanting to hold my hand while we were out and about. By midday, still day 2, her attitude has shifted completely and she is near mute. She isn't conversing with me, enjoying any activities, or even smiling anymore. At the bar, arcade, or even at home watching movies. You know how those driving games take a silly photo for your profile pic on the leaderboard? I was blowing a kissy face in mine. I glanced at hers and even snapped a pic without her noticing. Her head was tilted forward, looking up at the camera. She was blank-faced and you could mostly see the whites of her eyes. It was like the film poster of a horror film. Think The Orphan in 2009. Anyways, for the rest of the trip, she continued not to smile. She was cold to every service worker. She responded with one-word answers, otherwise complained about any and everything. I asked, "Are you okay?" a couple of times, and she replied, "I'm fine," avoiding eye contact. Car rides were silent. Dinners were silent. Day 4, final day. I drove her to the airport at 3 a.m. I asked if she enjoyed her visit, and she said it was okay, it was fine. I told her I enjoyed having her. She boarded her flight and left. I cannot figure out what caused this 180-degree shift. I paid for everything, took her to all sorts of events she wanted to go to, and even took a day off, my first sick day ever, to take her to more. I felt myself overcompensating because I felt insecure of being a terrible host or something. I've had several friends stay with me and express to me they enjoyed themselves so much they never wanted to leave. I don't believe I did anything so wrong to ruin this trip. When she arrived home, she did not contact me, but she posted photos and videos of me captioned "mine" on her social media. I haven't brought this conversation to her yet. All of my family and friends believe I narrowly avoided a Selena Yolanda Lifetime film situation, and that I was potentially with someone unstable. What do you think? So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.